Have you ever been bullied? Have you ever been treated poorly or badly by other people who were in a position of power? I remember being at school and I was terribly bullied. I was bullied because of my height. I was bullied because of my weight. I was bullied because I was of a different ethnicity than many of the people I went to school with. And being bullied was something that, just really made me feel insecure and negative about myself. And so when I'm reading this story in Mark's gospel where Jesus seems to be acting like a bully, it's really shocking and surprising to me. And something I'm discovering as I'm reading through this gospel is that Jesus often does things that we would consider to be strange or even foolish, but actually the point that he is trying to make is something that could really change our lives. Mark chapter 8, we find this. They came to Bethsaida and some people brought a blind man and begged Jesus to touch him. Now, this far into Mark's gospel, if you've been reading along, we have seen numerous times that Jesus has the power to heal people. Often people come to him with all kinds of diseases and he touches them or he speaks a word to them and they are healed. And so now the people have started to get used to and started to kind of remember the pattern or the method that Jesus seems to use. Yep, you bring people to Jesus, he touches them, he heals them. And so these people don't just bring this man to Jesus and say, please have pity on him. They actually start saying, hey, Jesus, do the thing that you always do. Touch him and then he'll be healed. And so Jesus does the opposite. He took the blind man by the hand and led him outside the village. Now, I just want you to imagine for a moment with me that you are somebody who is blind or somebody who has an impediment in your sight. You're partially sighted. Many people who are in that situation, they learn to navigate the places that they are familiar with, their home, their road, their workplace or their school, places that they know. And so within those locations, they can be relatively comfortable and relatively confident that they can find their way around. But if you take them outside of that place and you place them in a place that they've never been, you would be in a very vulnerable situation. And so Jesus takes this blind man out of the village, somewhere that he doesn't really know, and then he does something so completely unbelievable. This to me would seem like bullying. Jesus takes the man outside of the village, and it says, when he had spat on the man's eyes and put his hands on him, Jesus asked, do you see anything? So again, maybe I'm bringing my own story to this, but I remember as a young child at school that the bullies would sometimes get you by yourself and kind of corner you and then do things to you and say things to you and ask you questions, and everyone kind of like laugh along like, ha 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 ha, wow, that's so funny. Sometimes they'd even spit on you. So I'm seeing this man out there with Jesus and the 12 disciples. He doesn't know where he is. Jesus spits on him, right? He hears, and then like there's this moisture on his face. And then Jesus has the audacity to say, did you see anything? Can you see anything? Like that seems just cruel. Like why would you do this? And again, I'm astonished at the reaction of this man. He doesn't get angry. He doesn't cry. He actually responds to the question. And here's what it says. He looked up and said, I see people. They look like trees walking around. Here's the amazing thing. Jesus spits in this man's face and it actually kind of heals him partially. Now, forgive me, maybe it's because I'm a preacher, but I just get excited about this, that Jesus is so powerful that even his spit can do something. I mean, maybe there are some of you out there who you're like, man, I don't have hold of Jesus' hand. I don't have a real grip on his mind. But even if a little bit of his spit could get on your life, it might start to change and transform things. And so Jesus does something else. Once more, Jesus put his hands on the man's eyes. Then his eyes were opened, his sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. Jesus sent him home saying, don't even go into the village. I know you must be thinking, why would Jesus do something like this? You have to understand that Jesus was always teaching on multiple levels. He was, yes, ministering to the needs of that person, but he was also trying to teach something to the disciples and even something to us today who would read these stories later on. Let me see if I can help this to make sense. This man has this experience. He comes to Jesus, he's blind. Jesus does something to him that is offensive. But even though what happens to him is offensive, it kind of opens his eyes a little bit. But then it takes Jesus coming closer to him and touching him again for him to fully see what's going on. And then Jesus says to him, hey, please don't tell anyone about this. The very next story that we find is very similar. Let me see if I can help you to understand. And his disciples went on to villages around Caesarea Philippi. On the way, he asked them, who do people say I am? So he's speaking to the disciples. Hey, who's everyone saying I am? They replied, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others one of the prophets. So people had seen Jesus' actions. Some people had been offended by the way that he treated the Sabbath, by the way that he healed people, by some of the things that he said. But through his actions, though they had been offended, they were starting to glimpse there's something unusual about this man. Maybe he's a prophet. Maybe he's like Elijah. And so like the blind man, they had started to partially see who Jesus was. But then Jesus said to them, but what about you? Who do you say I am? Peter answered, you are the Messiah. Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. Do you see the parallel? Do you see the pattern? He asked his disciples a second time, who do you say I am? I know everyone says I'm this, I'm that, but who do you say I am? And Peter says, you know what? You're not just a good man. You're not just a prophet. You're not just a great teacher. I think you're the Messiah. And Jesus says, yes, now you're finally fully seeing it. Just like the blind man, hey, go back to the village, but don't tell anyone what happened. He says to the disciples, hey, don't tell anyone what you've understood. And then Jesus starts to unpack to them what it really means for him to be the Messiah. Why would Jesus do this? Why would he want to be teaching us this? The reality is that as a follower of Jesus, or as somebody who is considering being a follower of Jesus, there are always going to be people out there at three different stages, you could say. There are people who can't see anything. As far as they're concerned, there's just nothing to see. There are people in the middle who are seeing something about Jesus. There's something about faith that is beginning to make sense to them and that they're understanding. But there are also a lot of other things that are offensive, that just seem to be distasteful. And then there are individuals who feel like they can see fully. They are willing and able to accept that Jesus is the Messiah, the Savior of their lives. I don't know where you are in the journey, but all I can say to you is this. Sometimes Jesus' methods are unconventional. Sometimes they seem downright foolish, but his results speak for themselves. May you be one of those who come to discover the power in Jesus even when he offends you. May you be one of those who start to see, even if partially, that Jesus is not just a great teacher, he's not just a philosopher, but that actually there is something different, something powerful about him. And may you become one of those who see fully who he is, who is able to say with Peter, you are my Messiah. And may you come to follow God's own fool. For in truth, only the fools can really tell. Believe what seems to be unbelievable. May you come be a fool as well.